The wind carried the smell of dust and cedar through the lonely canyon as a line of battered wagons struggled across the rocky trail. Every man, woman, and child kept their voices low. The frontier had taught them that silence often meant survival. Above them, hawks circled beneath a cloudless sky, and somewhere beyond the cliffs, something unseen was watching. Marshal Caleb Turner tightened the reins of his dark bay horse and scanned the ridges. He had escorted dozens of wagon trains across dangerous territory during the past 10 years, but something about this valley felt wrong. There were no birds singing. No deer moved between the pines. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. He raised a hand, signaling the caravan to stop. The wheels creaked to a halt. "What is it, Marshal?" asked old Benjamin Cross, climbing down from the lead wagon. Caleb didn't answer immediately. His sharp blue eyes searched every shadow along the cliffs. "Someone passed through here recently," he finally said. "Too many fresh horse tracks." Benjamin frowned. "Bandits?" "Maybe." The settlers exchanged nervous glances. Most of them had already fled violence in the eastern states, hoping to build peaceful lives farther west. None of them wanted another fight. Caleb slowly dismounted and knelt beside the trail. The hoofprints were unusual. The horses had traveled in perfect formation, then suddenly scattered in different directions before disappearing into the rocks. "That's strange," he whispered. A young boy named Tommy stepped closer. "Can you tell where they went?" Caleb stood. "No." The answer unsettled him more than he cared to admit. He had spent most of his life reading tracks, yet these seemed almost deliberately confusing. Before anyone could speak again, a distant gunshot echoed through the canyon. Then another. Women screamed. Children ducked behind the wagons. "Everybody down!" Caleb shouted. The settlers immediately took cover as bullets struck the rocks nearby, sending sharp fragments into the air. But something didn't make sense. The shots weren't aimed at the wagon train. Instead, they came from deeper inside the canyon. Another volley rang out, followed by the unmistakable sound of horses charging. Caleb climbed onto a large boulder for a better view. What he saw left him speechless. A stagecoach burst around the bend at full speed, one wheel badly damaged and barely holding together. 4 exhausted horses pulled it across the rough ground while nearly a dozen masked riders chased close behind, firing their rifles without mercy. The driver was already slumped over the seat, motionless. Yet the coach refused to stop. Inside, someone else had taken the reins. As it raced closer, Caleb realized the driver wasn't another lawman. It was a young woman. Her face was streaked with dust, her hat had long since disappeared, and one sleeve was stained with blood. Even so, she controlled the frightened horses with remarkable skill, steering the damaged coach through narrow rocks that should have flipped it over. Behind her, the masked riders shouted to one another. "Don't let her escape!" Caleb reacted without hesitation. "Benjamin, protect the families." "What are you doing?" "I'm ending this." He mounted his horse in one smooth motion and kicked into a hard gallop. The distance closed quickly. One outlaw spotted him and raised a rifle. Too late. Caleb fired once. The outlaw's weapon flew from his hands as he lost his balance and tumbled into the dust. The remaining riders scattered, surprised that anyone would challenge them. The woman glanced back just long enough to notice the lone marshal charging straight into danger. Their eyes met for only a second. She didn't plead for help. She didn't panic. Instead, she nodded once, silently trusting a complete stranger. That single look told Caleb everything he needed to know. She wasn't running because she was afraid. She was protecting something inside the stagecoach that the outlaws were desperate to recover. The coach suddenly struck a hidden rock. The damaged wheel exploded into splinters. Wood cracked like thunder. The entire stagecoach lifted off the ground before crashing onto its side, sliding across the canyon floor in a cloud of dust. Caleb spurred his horse even faster. The masked riders turned toward the wreck with greedy smiles. Whatever had been hidden inside, they intended to reach it first. Caleb reached the wreck just as the first outlaw leaped from his saddle. The stagecoach lay on its side, one broken wheel still spinning lazily while frightened horses struggled against the tangled harness. Dust rolled across the canyon, reducing everything to shifting shadows. The air smelled of splintered wood, gunpowder, and frightened animals. "Stay back!" Caleb shouted. His revolver barked twice. The first bandit dropped behind a boulder for cover while another's horse reared wildly, throwing its rider into the gravel. The remaining outlaws spread across the canyon instead of charging together. Whoever led them knew exactly how to surround a target. Caleb slid from his saddle and crouched beside the overturned coach. "You hurt," he called. A strained voice answered from inside. "I've been better." The woman kicked open the damaged coach door and climbed halfway out. A cut above her eyebrow sent blood down one side of her face, but her green eyes remained steady. "My name's Charlotte Hayes," she said between breaths. "Forget about me." She pointed back into the shattered coach. "Protect the lockbox." Caleb glanced inside. A heavy iron chest had broken loose during the crash. Thick chains still wrapped around it, but one corner had split open just enough to reveal several worn leather journals instead of gold or silver. He frowned. "That's what they're after?" Charlotte nodded. "They'll kill anyone who touches it." Another rifle shot shattered the coach window inches from Caleb's shoulder. Wood exploded around them. "We can discuss it later," Caleb said. "Right now we survive." He crawled toward the trapped horses. The frightened animals kicked violently, their panic growing worse every second. "Easy now," he whispered. His calm voice slowed the nearest horse just enough for him to cut the tangled leather straps with his hunting knife. One by one, the horses pulled themselves free and galloped toward open ground before the outlaws could capture them. A whistle echoed across the canyon. Every masked rider immediately changed position. Charlotte's expression darkened. "That's him." "Who?" "Their leader." A rider dressed in a long black duster slowly appeared atop the ridge overlooking the battlefield. Unlike the others, he wore no mask. His gray beard rested neatly against his chest, and his cold eyes never left the iron chest below. He removed his hat politely. "Marshal Turner," the older man called. Caleb stiffened. "You know me." "I know nearly every lawman west of the Mississippi." His smile never reached his eyes. "And today, I truly hoped we'd never meet." Charlotte quietly whispered, "That's Silas Crow." Caleb recognized the name immediately. For years, stories about Crow had traveled from one frontier town to another. Some claimed he robbed banks. Others believed he dealt in stolen military secrets. No sheriff had ever managed to arrest him. "I don't care who you are," Caleb shouted. "Leave now." Crow chuckled. "If only life were that simple." He slowly pointed toward the broken lockbox. "I have no interest in the woman." His fingers shifted toward the journals. "I only want what's inside that chest." Charlotte's voice hardened. "You'll never get them." Crow's smile disappeared. "I was afraid you'd say that." He raised one hand. Instantly, every outlaw opened fire. Bullets slammed into the overturned coach from every direction. Caleb and Charlotte stayed low as splinters flew through the air. The iron chest rang loudly each time a bullet struck its heavy surface. "This won't hold forever," Charlotte said. Caleb quickly studied the canyon. The outlaws controlled the high ground. Staying here meant certain death. Then he noticed something beyond the smoke. A narrow trail climbed toward the northern cliffs. It was steep enough that horses couldn't follow easily, but two people on foot might reach it. He leaned closer. "Can you run?" Charlotte forced herself upright despite the pain in her injured arm. "I'll manage." Caleb grabbed the iron chest. It was far heavier than he expected. "What in the world is inside this thing?" Charlotte looked directly at him. "The truth." Before Caleb could ask another question, a deafening explosion echoed through the canyon. One of Crow's men had rolled a barrel of blasting powder toward the wreck. The burning fuse hissed across the ground. Caleb's eyes widened. "Move!" He seized the lockbox with one hand, grabbed Charlotte with the other, and sprinted toward the narrow mountain trail. Behind them, the stagecoach disappeared in a violent blast of fire and shattered timber. The shockwave threw both of them forward onto the rocky path. When Caleb looked back through the smoke, Silas Crow was no longer standing on the ridge. He had vanished. Only one thing remained visible in the drifting dust. Fresh boot prints. Leading toward the same mountain trail Caleb and Charlotte had just begun to climb. Caleb and Charlotte climbed the narrow mountain trail as loose stones slid beneath their boots. Behind them, thick smoke rose from the destroyed stagecoach, while the fading echoes of the explosion rolled across the canyon. Neither of them spoke. They both knew Silas Crow had disappeared for a reason. A man like him never abandoned a prize without a plan. After nearly an hour of climbing, the trail opened onto a hidden plateau surrounded by towering pines. In the center stood the weathered remains of an abandoned mining camp. Most of the cabins had collapsed years ago, but one stone building still stood with its roof mostly intact. "We'll rest there," Caleb said. Inside, Charlotte carefully set the heavy lockbox on an old wooden table. Her injured arm trembled from exhaustion. Caleb finally asked the question that had been bothering him ever since the attack. "What makes those journals worth so many lives?" Charlotte took a deep breath before unlocking the iron chest with a small brass key hidden beneath her collar. Inside were 5 leather-bound journals, several folded maps, and a worn document bearing the faded seal of the United States government. She gently placed one journal before Caleb. "My father spent 20 years working as a surveyor for the government," she explained. Officially, he was mapping frontier land. Secretly, he uncovered something much darker. Caleb opened the journal. Every page contained names, dates, payments, and detailed accounts of illegal land deals. Powerful businessmen, corrupt officials, and hired gangs had secretly forced dozens of peaceful frontier families off their land. Entire towns had disappeared because someone wanted control of valuable rivers, forests, and gold deposits. "This is enough to destroy some of the richest men in the territory," Caleb whispered. Charlotte nodded. Silas Crow wasn't stealing the journals. He was hired to destroy them. Before Caleb could answer, footsteps echoed outside. Both reached for their revolvers. The cabin door slowly opened. To Caleb's surprise, it wasn't Crow. It was Benjamin Cross. The old wagon leader entered with several settlers from the caravan. "We tracked your horses," Benjamin said with relief. "Thought you might need help." Caleb smiled for the first time that day. "I'm glad you came." Moments later, another gunshot shattered the cabin window. Crow had found them. Bandits surrounded the entire mining camp, taking positions behind broken wagons, stone walls, and abandoned mining equipment. Silas Crow stepped into the open. "There are too many of us," he called calmly. "Hand over the journals." Charlotte stepped outside before Caleb could stop her. "You've chased these papers for years," she said. "But today everyone will learn why." Crow laughed. "Only if someone lives long enough to read them." His men advanced. Caleb quickly organized the settlers. The old mine offered natural cover, and everyone capable of handling a rifle took a position. Even those who couldn't fight carried ammunition, treated injuries, or helped protect the children hiding inside the stone building. The battle that followed was fierce. Gunfire echoed across the mountains as bullets chipped stone and shattered old timbers. Crow's men attacked from every direction, believing numbers alone would guarantee victory. But they underestimated the determination of ordinary people defending the truth. Benjamin knocked one outlaw from his horse with an accurate rifle shot. Tommy, the same curious boy from the wagon train, bravely carried extra ammunition between defenders despite the danger. Charlotte refused to hide. Although wounded, she fired carefully from behind a stone wall, forcing several attackers to retreat. Meanwhile, Caleb searched for Crow. He finally spotted him slipping toward the cabin while everyone else was distracted. Crow wasn't trying to win the gunfight. He was trying to steal the journals. Caleb sprinted after him. Inside the cabin, Crow had already grabbed the lockbox. "You've caused enough suffering," Caleb said. Crow slowly turned. "You still don't understand." He pulled a burning stick of dynamite from his coat. "If I can't destroy the evidence, I'll bury it forever." He tossed the dynamite toward the cabin floor. Caleb reacted instantly. He lunged at Crow, knocking both men through the open doorway just as the dynamite exploded inside. The blast destroyed half the cabin. The lockbox, however, landed safely outside beneath a pile of broken beams. Crow struggled to stand. His revolver had fallen several feet away. He glanced toward it, then toward the steep cliff behind him. Realizing he had no escape, he made one desperate attempt to reach his weapon. The loose ground beneath his boots suddenly gave way. Crow lost his balance. He slid backward down the rocky slope before disappearing into the deep ravine below. Silence settled over the mountain. The remaining outlaws lowered their weapons. Without their leader, they surrendered one by one. Several weeks later, Caleb personally delivered the journals to the territorial court. The evidence exposed years of corruption, leading to numerous arrests and restoring stolen land to dozens of innocent families. The newspapers called it the largest justice case the frontier had ever witnessed. Charlotte was offered a position preserving historical records so the truth would never be hidden again. As for Caleb, he declined every reward placed before him. When asked why, he simply smiled. Some things are worth protecting because they're right, not because they're profitable. Months later, a new settlement was built on land once claimed through corruption. Families who had nearly lost everything gathered together to celebrate its opening. At the center of the town stood a small wooden sign carved with simple words. "Truth outlives fear." Every traveler who passed through stopped to read it. Few remembered the names of the outlaws who tried to erase history, but generations remembered the marshal who chose courage over comfort, the determined woman who refused to surrender the truth, and the ordinary people who stood together when it mattered most. Because in the Wild West, legends were not born from the fastest gun. They were born from the choices people made when doing the right thing came with the greatest cost.